All right, let's try this again. I think I'm in here. I think I'm live. I'm going to actually make sure. Test, test, test. There we go. All right. I think I'm back. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining in. If you're listening on Twitch or if you're listening in on YouTube, um, thanks as. Ooh, ooh, sorry. Playing with my audio here. I'm trying something new. I'm doing a new subscription service. I'm listening in or tuning in with StreamYard instead of OBS like I usually use. So, of course, always making it difficult for myself. But let's talk a little bit about this past weekend. It was a little crazy. UFC 251. It was a great card, I think, through and through. It's definitely worth the money. Pretty much, I think, what most of us expected from the fights. Unfortunately, for the main event, it was exactly what everybody would have assumed would have happened. But let's kind of go through this. So let's start off with the Paige Van Zandt and the oh my God, and the Amanda Ribas fight. You could tell I'm not on right now, but what is there to say? I think this is. I didn't even expect Paige to get finished that fast. To be quite honest, I thought she is tough enough. She's proven that in her past fights that she'd be able to hold up for a little bit. But Amanda Ribas, man, she's apparently something else. She's next level. She's fighting in that division, and she just made a statement by that armbar win there. You got to think Paige had to be a little afraid for a little bit. Coming in there, and you figure her arm's she's already broken her arm, I think once, maybe even twice in the past year and a half. And then she's threatened with the arm bar. That was crazy. But Amanda Ribas has showed her strength in her judo. She showed her strength in a little bit in her striking before she took her down, but it was the Amanda show, and I'm going to be pumped to see what she has next as far as a matchup. Let's go on to the Rose versus Jessica Andrade fight. Man, this was a great fight, just like the first one. It looked like Rose was going to cruise to a decision. I thought, to Jessica's credit, I thought she was going to burn out her slip. Over. She was exerting so much energy early on in that fight, but damn if she isn't entertaining. I mean, she came back at the later half of the second round and then really came on and did some damage in that third round to Rose. Man, because I thought Rose was just going to run away with that again. I was like, she's so smart. She keeps her range very well. Her striking is on point. She proved it again. I mean, she even looked on point in that fight. I don't know if maybe it was a little bit of ring rust or something, but yeah, Jessica really turned it on in that third round. But again, all credit goes to Rose. She's just above the competition, I think, in this weight division, and she shouldn't be fighting anybody that isn't the champion. She should be fighting Wei Li next. Absolutely. That's going to be a fun fight. I can't wait to see. And it's going to be interesting to see how that turns out too, right? Because I mean, Wei Li and Joanna's skill level, apparently, from what we saw earlier this year in an incredible fight, they're pretty much on par with each other, those two, their skill levels. So, and we've seen what Rose did to JJ twice. So that'll be an interesting matchup. I cannot wait for that fight. That should be a lot of fun. Again, nothing. Going into this fight, though, I will say my last comment kind of on this one, because again, I think Rose really ran away with this. Andrade did really good in the beginning. I said that she needed to keep her range because Andrade was going to be looking for those short shots, like those haymakers, those hooks, those overhands. But she landed a few, and man, it did some damage to Rose in that third round. It was crazy, but Rose did good. She kept her distance against much shorter fighters, so good for her. I'm excited to see what how she looks against Wei Li. That'll be a fun fight right there. But let's get into the fun stuff. That's the championship fights, starting with Piotr Jan and Jose Aldo. Man, Jose, it's going to be interesting to see where he goes from here because he clearly has the skill level in his boxing to beat the best of the best at 145 or 135. Maybe not 130 or 145 now with all the great new talent that's coming up, all the young guys there, but he still has incredible boxing. But it's the same old Aldo, man. He gasses after three. And what happened to his leg kicks? he was moving, he was grooving, he was, early on, it looked like, when Piotr Jan was checking those leg kicks, his leg was going flying, and you're thinking, oh man, Jose might finish this with a TKO stoppage from leg kicks. But then he stopped all of a sudden out of nowhere. Everybody's been wondering where that's been at the last few fights of his. And it's like, and then he turns it on, and you're thinking, okay, perfect. We're back to seeing some old Aldo, some of those nasty leg kicks that made him so famous early in his career. And then I think after round two, that was it, done. I don't know if he's going to come out and say maybe he hurt his foot, maybe he hurt his shin. I don't know, but it blew me away. If I was his coach, I'd be like, you're just blasting that leg for the next 3 rounds, coming into round 3, obviously with the championship fights in front of, or championship bouts in front of him. But I mean, on the other side of that, I expected Jan to win this one. Jan's just he's too strong. He's too young. He's hungry. I know Jose says that there's nobody more hungry than he is, but dude, you've held the title. You know what that's like. He's held the title most of his career in the UFC and WEC combined. Piotr Jan was hungry. This is his first belt. He looked great. He looks good. You know what? He doesn't do anything crazy in his stand-up, but he does the basics well. He throws fast. He throws hard. And he looks strong, and he's big for the division too. I mean, like 5'7", 5'8", that's pretty big for that division. So, I mean, we saw how big Aldo looked, and Aldo's the same size as Jan pretty much. We saw how big Aldo looked against Moraes, who Moraes looks big for that division too. So, but man, I think the most telling thing in this, the controversy coming out of it, was this ref, man. What was he thinking? Aldo took in that last round 62 shots, and I think that was basically like the whole round. That was all on the floor. That went on way too long, man. These refs got to pick that up. I understand, like, that goes. It's just funny, like, to see the two halves of this, right? Like, on the one side, we saw Cruz. I thought that might have been arguably an early stoppage when he fought Cejudo, for Cejudo's final fight before he retired. But then you have this one where they just let it go on so long, and then they're going to use the excuse, oh, well, it's a championship fight. That's way, all right. For starters, that's way too many shots. Again, Piotr landed 62 of 68 shots. Jose Aldo landed 1 shot in that 5th round. That's insane. That's insane. He was swimming. His head was swimming in his own blood for a solid minute, just taking shots, and everybody's just yelling at the screen like, "Are you going to stop this? Are you?" They need to take more responsibility. But that's just ridiculous. Not to mention his face was so close. He was right in there. Well, I hope to see that ref get penalized for that. He needs some repercussions from that, because that's bullcrap to see someone take that much damage. That's supposed to be the difference between us and boxing. Boxing, those guys just keep taking the head damage. They keep taking the blows. They can stand up as many times as long as they beat the 10 count. This was supposed to prevent that long-term damage, at least try to. I don't think that's something you can completely get rid of in a sport like this, or any kind of contact sport for that matter. But I mean, that was ridiculous. That was so ridiculous. That was terrible. And I think it doesn't help that there was a controversial decision in the next fight, but we'll get into that in a second. Piotr Jan won every round as far as the striking goes, but I think in the 1st and 2nd round, it was clearly stronger strikes from Jose. Well, mostly due to the leg kicks, because when Piotr started checking those, his leg was going flying. It was crazy. But that was a good fight, and I can't wait to see Piotr Jan fight Aljamain Sterling next. He better be fighting Aljamain. Aljamain's been waiting in the wings for a long time. He's deserving. That one's going to be a fun fight. I can't wait to see how that one's going to turn out. A long striker like Aljamain, against the boxer and Jan. That's going to be interesting. I can't wait to see that fight. Hopefully we get that before the end of the year. So that's pretty much it for that one. Let's get into the featherweight matchup. This is the rematch, Volkanovski versus Holloway. People are split down the middle. Now, I'll tell you, I think when you sit back and think about it, you start like leaning into one side or the other. But I remember being at the end of the fight initially like, man, that's going to be a close fight. Like when that ended, and that was mostly due to the 3rd round. Nothing else. It wasn't like, I don't think rounds 1 and 2 were questionable, and I thought round 3 may be the only one that was questionable as far as strikes landed. Now, the interesting thing here too was during the live show, I recall those numbers being a heck of a lot different, right? Like the numbers that they had listed very heavily favored Holloway initially, but then the UFC came out there on their stats site today with the updated stats, and Volkanovski won most of it was a lot closer. Like the margins were a lot slimmer. Before it looked like Holloway was running away with those rounds. But I mean, even if we just look in round 1, where, let's look at round 1 and 2 specifically, because those are the ones that seem like Holloway ran away with those ones, right? So Holloway landed 19 of 47 for a 40% striking average, landed average. And then Volkanovski landed 19 of 39. So they both landed 19. All right. And then if you go into the second round, Volkanovski actually landed one more punch with 22 to Holloway's 21. And they were at 46 and 40 respectively. Holloway with the lower percentage in striking accuracy there. But the thing that those numbers don't tell you is Holloway knocked him down both rounds 1 and 2. He knocked him down. How much should that weigh, man? This is something I've been thinking about over the weekend and even into today when I was talking to some friends at work about this. How much should those weigh extra? Because a few years ago, when the unified rules implemented traditionally it's a 10-9 round for the most part, right? You got 10-9, and then if you lose points, you can get 9-9s and stuff like that. But they initiated 10-8s, and in rare cases, which I don't even remember the last time I seen it, is a 10-7 round too. We never see a 10-7s, and it's supposed to be the point system is supposed to be more flexible, but still, most of the point scoring that we see is a 10-9. So my question to them was, and I don't have the right answer here, I'm just proposing it, is should a knockdown count as a 10-8? Like if it's a close round, if it's a close round, everything's even, but you get a knockdown, that's tough. It's not like people are getting, 4 or 5 knockdowns a fight like you can with the takedowns. And knockdowns are completely different, right? A knockdown is a very well-placed punch or kick. Let's just say strike. But it just brings up that question to me because, I mean, at the end of the fight, so for me, I think the most telling thing is like the way I came up when I started training MMA is it's all about damage, right? It's like it's about damage, it's about finishing the fight. Both guys, I think, tried to go for the finish. Holloway got close twice. At least he wobbled him at least 2 times. So to me, he should have came out on top with that one. I definitely, again, going back, I think it was a close fight. I don't think it was like super egregious, but sometimes you're just like, what are these guys looking for? What are these refs looking for? And I cannot tell you how much I hate when Dana White brings up, oh, don't leave it to the judges. You have 2 incredibly talented athletes, well-trained. They're training to go 25 hard minutes. They're training to finish each other. I mean, it's not as easy as that sounds. Don't take it to the judges. They've been training for 10 weeks, hard, fighting hard, sparring hard to not go to the judges. But sometimes that happens, man. When you got 2 guys that are so determined, they're world class. They're champions. They're both champions now. That's so much easier said than done. To me, that's a bullshit excuse because the refs have one damn job. All right. And that's to show up and score the fights right. This was very much reflective. And one of my buddies brought this up earlier. This was very reflective of the Dominic Reyes and John Jones fight, even though I thought that one was even more for Dominic Reyes. Like to me, Dominic Reyes clearly won rounds 1 through 3. For me, it was a coin flip in round 3 on this one for Holloway. My point is leaning more towards the damage that he did earlier in the fight. Should that have accounted for more points? Right. And what I'm saying about the judges isn't necessarily for this fight alone, but just in general, because we've seen so much bad judging. I mean, people are getting exhausted from the bad judging. It's almost it's as bad as boxing. Actually, I don't know if you ever watched the Tyson Fury and Wilder fight #1. That was ridiculous, but that's a whole other story. Uh, but you got what the judges have one damn job. These fighters are doing everything else. They're doing press. They're doing live media. They're keeping up with their social media platforms because you better believe that the UFC has them doing that, right? That's not just from their own goodwill, unless you're Paige Van Zandt and you're making a crap load of money on there, as opposed to like what you're signing on your contracts. Supposedly, that's what she's saying, right? But yeah, and then they're training for 10 weeks hard. They're cutting a ton of weight. A lot of these guys are cutting 20, 30 pounds, in 10 weeks to get into a fight. I, they shouldn't have to worry about this. Not to mention, I think it was Joe Rogan brought up a great point that when you make a bad decision, and again, I'm not saying this particularly for this fight because it was close. I'm just saying in general, you're taking money out of these fighters' pockets. Because if you don't know the pay structure for a lot of these guys, they come in, they get say a lot of these guys sign the contracts, especially when they're in that $100,000 to maybe $200,000 range. Actually, I'd say more like the $1 to $150,000 range. You come in, you sign your fight for $100,000 to show up, and then a win bonus of $100,000. Now that again, that's only for the more experienced fighters. Like most of these guys sign $20,000 show bonus or show money, and then another $20,000 win bonus. So if you screw somebody out of a decision, a very egregious decision, which we see a lot, you're taking away literally 50% of their income. And who knows if they're going to even be able to fight for the rest of the year. You don't know what the matchmaking is going to look like. You don't know if you're going to get lucky and get another fight before the end of the year. That's you don't know what injuries you're going to take. So that's crap. And then on top of that, you're not even including, all right, you're not even including in that what they have to pay their management, what they have to pay their camps. These guys fly people out to train with them, specialists, for the people that they're fighting. Like, for instance, Masvidal was flying out wrestlers to train for Usman. This was, again, before he couldn't get the fight originally. And then they signed Gilbert Burns. But still, like, that's a lot of money these boys are spending, and women too, of course. That's a lot of money they're spending. And you're taking that away from them because of bad calls, especially split decisions. To me, I think split decisions also are pretty telling too, because it rarely ever seems like we get split decision in close fights. It's like that fight definitely shouldn't. I think we had one on the prelims, if I remember correctly. I forgot which fight it was, but there was a split decision on there. We were all just kind of like, what fight were they watching? I think even Michael Bisping said that too. Michael Bisping was getting into fights on Twitter, though, so he might not have been watching the fight fully. But either way, I think like most people, the round 3 is the controversial round in that fight, right? That's the one that is splitting everybody up. I saw a few people online saying, "Oh, well, Holloway won round 5." I don't think so. I don't think like Volkanovski's takedowns to me didn't mean anything because Max got back up, but he just landed a few more shots. Like Vol landed 37 to Holloway's 23 in round 5. He landed 34 to Holloway's 24 in round 4. Now, a lot of those again were leg kicks. Take that for what you will. Actually, funny enough, it seems like besides round 5, round 3 was, even though it seemed to be the closest round of the fight, that actually had the biggest striking differential, landed at least. So Volkanovski landed 25 to Holloway's 15. But, and the other thing, too, that stinks about that decision is now you rob the fans of a future matchup of these guys, because there's no reason to sign up for a third fight when a guy's 2-0 in the series. It happens occasionally, but whatever. That kind of ruins it. Granted, I don't want to see that back to back. Like, I want to see these guys fight other people. I do not like instant rematches, period, unless there's a draw or something crazy happens. I do not like seeing instant rematches, but I just mean in general, like, if these guys were to go their separate ways, they were to fight like Cater and Ike and, Korean Zombie, they were to fight one of those guys and then maybe meet up if they're both winning still. But the good thing for Holloway is there's still a ton of guys for him to fight, a ton of young guys. Those people I just named, I mean, he has the beats sitting there too. There's a ton of good young guys for them to match up with. So it's going to be exciting. I mean, either way, featherweight's deep. It's going to be fun to watch. Holloway's still a young dude. So any one of these guys can come in and finish Alex, finish him up. And then Max is right back in the title shot, assuming he's still winning. So it'll be interesting. But hey, you know what? On the flip side, Alex is a great athlete, fantastic athlete. He looks like a freaking running back. If you see his legs in there, they're thick, man. This guy, mind you, he was a rugby player. He weighed 240 pounds, people. He's fighting at 145. He's the champ at 145. He was playing rugby at 240. He was solid, too. It's not like he looked fat or anything. He was a solid dude. So hats off to Alex. He's a great dude. And I hope the best for him. It's just, he's 0 for 3 in his last 3 fights as far as excitement goes. He had a great fight. I think it was against Chad Mendez, was wild. That was fun. And then he's just been leg kick heavy. I mean, hey, it works. It's a strategy. It works. It got him the title, and he beat the 2 best featherweights in UFC history, and Max Holloway twice now, and Jose Aldo. So hats off to him. But all right, let's get into the headliner, the one everybody wants to talk about. I'm trying to keep this relatively short. Where am I at? I'm a little over 20 minutes right now. Not too bad, right? Guess not. Yeah, so we have Usman and Masvidal. Honestly, when we were coming into this, I think everybody that knows MMA knew that this is how the fight was going to turn out. Now, granted, we all hope that Jorge would come with some magic and, be able to pull a Ben Askren move on him or something, because I even said coming into this fight, the name of the game is going to be, it's all going to be determined with Masvidal and if he's able to keep the distance. Now, to his credit, man, he could not get taken down. Usman had a ton of trouble early on. He was even huffing and puffing in his quarters, I thought, after some of the earlier rounds, a little bit more than we've seen from him lately. But man, Masvidal looked good. I mean, considering this was on 6 days' notice, he had to cut 20 pounds and all that stuff. He could not get taken down. And at any time they split, he was taking advantage. He was throwing heavy, he was throwing combinations. He was landing good combinations, but Usman's just too strong. He's too big, man. He's a good wrestler. He's gonna pin you up against that cage and win by foot stomps. No, I don't mean to hate, because he is a nice guy. You know what I mean? Like, if you've listened to his interviews and stuff, he sounds like a nice dude. But to me, he's just another. He's like another Tyron Woodley, except Tyron Woodley was stalemated in the middle of the ring. He just would hesitate to throw punches and circle around you, land just enough to win a fight. I mean, that's pretty much all Usman's going to do is press you. I mean, to me, sure, like his fight with Colby Covington, incredible. Like, that was one of the best fights of the year, hands down. But that was because that's a matchup made in heaven, because both those guys are very similar fighters. They're almost the exact same. So they pretty much negate each other's wrestling ability. And then it's all pressure and striking from there. So, I mean, even as far as it goes, round 1 was, they were all relatively close as far as it goes in strikes. Masvidal actually landed more strikes. He landed 24 to Usman's 18 in round 1. But again, like, I don't know how the stat keepers take that for the UFC. Like, do they count all those foot stomps as strikes? I mean, I would have to assume so, because Usman really didn't throw that many strikes. And I mean, he still landed 27, 14, 23, and 12 into those later rounds. So I would have to assume that they count those. It didn't seem like it did that much damage to Masvidal. I don't know. But it's one of those things, like, going back to, I'm like, the judge did perfectly fine in this match. I'm just saying, like, we go back to it, like, should he have separated him more? Bring him back out? I don't know. Because, they made the cage originally for U.S.-based wrestlers when the UFC started. That was to favor U.S. wrestlers. You can pin people up, hold them down, freestyle wrestling. I love wrestling. I love watching it. I think it's such a great sport. It's an explosive sport, but this is the problem, is when you have somebody that can he Mayweathered him, right? Mayweather's a defensive boxer. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I mean, there's no doubt Mayweather's one of the greatest boxers of all time, but he was boring as hell to watch. And it's the same thing for Usman when he gets into this, because he did the same thing against Tyron Woodley to win the belt. pressed him up against the cage, held him there, did just enough to have the ref not separate them. Like anytime he got a warning, he'd throw like little shots, nothing damaging, but just enough to keep him there and just rack up the points, round through round. To me, I think the best matchup for him is going to be Gilbert Burns, because it's tough fighting somebody that and you've trained with. They trained at the same camp. They sparred together. They trained together. They know each other's strengths. They know each other's weaknesses, and they know each other's habits. Just like any other sport, just like anything else in general, people are creatures of habits. Athletes are creatures of habits. So you have to adjust that a little bit, when you're fighting somebody that but he knows his strengths. He knows his weaknesses. He knows these two fighters know each other. So this is going to be interesting. I am excited to see this one. On paper, Gilbert Burns is the better all-around fighter, but Usman's huge. Wrestling negates. It's the great equalizer. It negates everything. It negates great jiu-jitsu, which Gilbert Burns is a great jiu-jitsu practitioner. He has a couple world titles in jiu-jitsu. Because if you have a great wrestler, they can pin you down, they can hold you down and make sure that you're not going anywhere, that you're not going to be able to transition, that you're not going to be able to move and look for those sweeps. That's what a good wrestler does. And as we saw on Saturday, it negates striking. Close that distance, press a man up against the cage, do enough to stay there and not have the ref separate you and win those rounds. So I think that's probably Usman's next best. I know Leon Edwards was really, really pushing for that title shot, which he is very deserving of, and he should certainly be in line. But I think Gilbert, assuming he gets healthy, he had COVID. That's why he got pulled from this originally. So if he's available before the end of the year, I say that's the matchup to make, assuming he's healthy, Best wishes go out to him, thinking about that as well, that he's sick. Him and I think two of his cornermen, I think, tested positive. So, best wishes to them. But I think that's the matchup to make. Now, Leon Edwards, this is the same guy, mind you. He's a top contending welterweight. And I posted the story on my Facebook feed a while back. He actually had to go back to his waiter job at Longhorn, I think it was. One of the steakhouses, something like that. You're talking about a world-class athlete in the UFC's welterweight division, a top contender, waiting tables. I'm not going to get into the pay discussion because I can obviously go on forever. But, that's why he's also vying for the title shot so bad. Get a piece of that pay-per-view and, make some good money and not have to wait tables anymore. Poor guy. But now Gilbert Burns is the one to make after this. As for Masvidal, man, it's open for him, man. He said he doesn't want to fight Colby Covington. Honestly, I wouldn't either. And it's not because he's scary. It's just like, do you really want Colby's a pain in the ass. He talks a lot of crap. To me, it's annoying. I don't like it. Like, do you really want to go through that whole thing with him? And I don't know. He's a frustrating fighter. It's essentially like fighting Usman again. He's just going to press you up against the cage. The only thing is Colby does have a little bit better striking because he throws this, he'll throw combinations. He'll keep throwing hands, which looks a lot better. But that's pretty much it, people. That was UFC 251. To me, it was a great card all the way up until the main event. And, the main event really fell flat with the momentum that the other fights had. And that's, again, congratulations to Usman. He seems like a great guy when you listen to him in his interviews, but his fight style is just boring as hell, man. It really is. But hey, you know what? On the flip side, however you got to make that money, make that paper, stay there, win, be successful. He has a title. He has a UFC welterweight world title. He is on top of the world right now, especially after that card. I haven't even seen what the pay-per-view numbers are yet. They usually release that like midweek. So I'll be interested to see, because supposedly Dana White said that it was tracking just as high, if not higher, than a Conor McGregor fight. We'll see. But otherwise, like Fight Island, it really didn't look different from any other event, right? Like it looked like the UFC Apex Center. I have my first guest on the show. If you're watching, it looked no different from the Apex Center. It was really unflattering when they did the aerial view of the stadium and they're like in this big like industrial lot. we've seen the pictures of the cage on the beach and all that stuff. And that gets you excited hearing like Fight Island, Fight Island. Then you just they do the aerial shot from the drone, and it's just a large tent in a big parking lot. And it's like, oh man, that kind of ruins it. That kind of ruins it a little bit, but that is what it is, right? That's pretty much it. We got a good scrap this weekend between Dan Ige and Cater. Speaking of good featherweights matching up, that should be a firefight. That will be fun. If nothing else, just it's a free fight. Tune in for that damn fight alone. That one's gonna be fun. Both those guys are entertained. They're coming off of great fights. Cater just finished Jeremy Stevens, and Dan Ige just fought to a decision with Barboza. Edson Barboza, crazy striker. That was a great fight too. So tune in. I'm telling you, it's gonna be fun. But otherwise, thank you as always for listening. Tune in. You can catch us on all social media platforms: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. At the Casuals MMA, you can always find our little fist, the little logo there at the top. And then you can download our podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. The audio only at Apple, iHeart, Spotify, and other places. And then YouTube and Twitch, you can always catch our videos. So thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe. Please leave us some comments and some likes. Help our station grow a little bit. And appreciate it as always. Thank you, everybody. I'll catch you later.